Keep your hands and head inside the vehicle at all times. Buckle your seatbelts, check your mirrors, sit on back and relax. It's lights out and away we go for the Tall and Short of It podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Tall and Short of It podcast, coming to you live from a shipping container in the Atlantic Ocean. I'm your host, Justin.
And I'm Aaron. Welcome back, everyone. We've got a lot to recap after the Azerbaijan Baku Grand Prix. We've got the Canadian Grand Prix coming up this weekend. League of Legends is back, and I believe we have some Magic the Gathering as well. So we've got a full slate ahead of you. Justin, good to see you. How you doing?
Yeah, good to see you too, man. Doing pretty well. Yeah, long weekend with the Grand Prix. We had a slew of LPL matches. Sadly, no Magic the Gathering games though this week, so that always puts a damper on it. But yeah, overall, just really looking forward to getting into the episode. How are you doing, sir? How you been?
I've been good. It's been, well, and I'll kind of just lead right into my Rose, Thorn, and Seed.
Go for it.
Some good and some bad. So I'll start with my Thorn. But Colleen, over the weekend at her fun bachelorette weekend and all, ended up catching the virus, and so she's sick right now. So the good news about that is now for the upcoming little bit, we'll both be able to feel a little more comfortable that we won't get sick, and so we can not worry as much as we're going and doing like travel for family vacations or different things throughout the summer. Now that we have some antibodies, so a little bit of a thorn, but fortunately it hasn't hit her too hard. So she's doing all right.
Very cool. Glad to hear it.
But my rose this week is just kind of a follow-up on my crazy work week last week. But things are going much better this week. It's been a much smoother week so far. It's always busy, but in general, things are going more smoothly. And with my seed, that has just allowed me to have a bit more time to work on some like larger projects, writing some kind of instructional things for my position at work so that if I'm out on vacation or whatnot, people are still able to kind of manage the day-to-day without needing to reach out to me or anything. So that and some other things have been able to kind of start checking off my to-do list. So my to-do list is getting a little smaller, which is definitely a good thing. So pretty quick for my Rose, Thorn, and Seed, but some good stuff, and then hopefully Colleen feeling better soon.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm glad to hear that, overall things are going well. Now, do you look as Wednesday, obviously Wednesday is hump day, do you look as that as, like, halfway over, or, like, are you cup half full, cup half empty kind of guy?
Oh, it's definitely a cup half full, I guess. I'm like, at the end of my Wednesday, I'm like, oh, it's like basically the weekend, and there's still 2 full days left. Thursdays and Fridays, I feel like, are typically a bit more relaxed of weekdays in general for between work, and then just like afterwards, like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm usually pretty busy, whether it's basketball, us recording. Mondays, usually I'm looking to play some games with friends or do different stuff, get out and about with Colleen. So those last 2 days are kind of my free, like, oh, we can just kind of do whatever kind of days.
That's dope.
Yeah, so I definitely look at it that way. But is that kind of your same attitude on the week, or?
Yeah, I think so. I tend to front load a lot of things on like the Monday, Tuesday, and then whatever I don't get done then gets pushed to Wednesdays, and then Thursdays and Fridays are usually like very empty as far as the to-do list goes, which is always pretty nice. So yeah, hump day in effect, that's for sure.
Very cool. Yeah, I think that's the, like, if you can, like, offload those last 2 days of the week, then I feel like having everything done, it just leaves the weekend and all open to, like, obviously there's some things that you might need to do, run to the grocery store, do some like cleaning around, but generally you're not like, oh, now my weekend days are full of things that I have to do and I can't like actually enjoy them. And I think that's not a fun way to kind of plan the week, in my opinion.
No, I definitely agree. It's like having a study hall at the end of the day, free and clear, pretty cool. Let me run through my rose, thorn, and seed here, and we can get on to the important stuff. Just a small little tidbit. So I was expecting Magic cards to come in on Thursday, but they came in a day earlier, and much like the you may appreciate this reference, much like the Dashboard Confessional song, where it's not the price that'll kill you, it's the weight that'll really bring you down, down, down. And so no matter what, my brain space is 90% occupied with when will it get here. So when I cracked open that mailbox, saw them in there a day early, I was like, whoa, boy! Like my mind was actually blown. It was insane.
Wait,
so that was pretty funny.
Do you not like track it?
Usually I do. And when I had looked, like after it had processed and whatever day they were going to give me would be pretty locked in, the tracking said Thursday up until like yesterday. I checked yesterday and it said Thursday and it showed up today. That rarely ever happens. So I was like, all right, maybe something's happening here.
I was just, I feel like when I'm getting to the end of a package being, like, when you get that first notification after you buy something and they're like, the shipping label's been created, and then you're just like sitting there like, okay, waiting for it to actually ship. Once I know the general day, those last couple days, I just kind of hawk it because I'm just waiting. I'm like, oh, is this what's gonna happen? Because I've had packages get lost that just disappear, and it's like arriving tomorrow, and then that was like 5 days ago, and I'm like, oh no, what's going on?
Holy heck! Yeah, it's it can really be a crapshoot sometimes. So when it shows up early, man, I was stoked.
Very
That
cool.
was cool. And then also, I've been taking my coffee without cream, and that has been helping. I think the half and half was, maybe making my belly rumble a little bit. So I cut out the cream, and it's been doing good.
Do you still enjoy it as much, or
Yeah.
like flavor and taste and all?
Yeah, it's just like a warm cup of joe. I love it. I thought I might have minded it, but I was like, I really don't care. I just enjoy the thing, whatever. I enjoy the thing in the form that'll make me feel the best. So if anything, I like it more now.
Okay.
Right.
So, yeah, that makes
Anyway.
sense.
So my seed, I'll just say this little thing. I don't want to go too far into it. We have more important things to talk about. My seed is I can only control my reactions. I cannot control people. And I've been trying to wrap my head around that because my thorn for this week, there have been individuals recently, unnamed, unknown really, but they have been living in my head rent-free in a way that I've just been like mulling over, dreading an interaction, don't want to like just really waiting for it to come to a head. And once it did, I realized that all of the concerns were unfounded. You were wrong. It didn't matter. You were just like you were creating a demon in your head that really never existed in the first place. And so the lesson I really try to take from that is like, you can't know until you know. So I was like, we can't let these individuals live in my head rent free. I need that moolah, baby. So that's my thorn for the week. But let's talk about the Baku City Grand Prix in Azerbaijan.
All right. So, very exciting race, at least like looking into it. There was also a lot of action throughout the race, but kind of as I mentioned last episode, we were under the expectation that, hey, there might end up being some craziness, and there might end up being a very bizarre podium or finishing or anything because of how kind of wild the Grand Prix has been previously with red flags and safety cars and all sorts of stuff. So, leading into it, of course, we had a really exciting qualifying. We saw Leclerc end up on pole, putting in just an insane lap. Checo giving Max the tow and still outpacing him for that final lap and everything to go P2. Max coming in P3, and then Carlos Sainz ending up in fourth. So the four drivers that we expected to be at the top all up there. But were there any, I guess, initial surprises from qualifying or things that you kind of were looking at going into the race?
Well, I think the team that surprised me the most, like overall, was the AlphaTauris with Gasly and Yuki. I think qualifying outside of where we see them usually, they tend to be a little further down the grid. Obviously, not like back markers technically, but the P6 and P8 qualifying position seem really good from them, really good from the car. So I thought that was surprising. And then also the Seb Vettel qualifying result, making it into Q3 with that P9. Put him in contention for a repeat of last year, where he took a surprise podium. I think some people would say.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I think that just looking at the AlphaTauris, like you had mentioned, they had a banger of a weekend, and were really just on it the entire weekend long. Great qualifying, great pace, and it seems like that car, they've started to kind of really whatever upgrades or different changes that they've made in their setup and everything has started to kind of make itself apparent a bit. They had both been kind of struggling after last season, the car being very competitive and really like competing for that P6, P7, P8 kind of range in almost every race. We really haven't seen that much this year, even though I think we see Gasly still driving pretty well and Yuki making the kind of improvements that we were hoping he would make into his second season in Formula One. I think he's been much more competitive with Pierre, as we've mentioned in previous episodes. He's looked really good. He hasn't been making the same kind of rookie mistakes or really crashing out too much, having too many incidents. He's like made steps to improve on a lot of areas. And so seeing them both still kind of struggling when we know that they are both really solid quality drivers. I had kind of been hoping that this would happen, but I had almost, after the first few races, resigned myself to just being like, I don't know, maybe the AlphaTauri just won't figure it out until later on, or maybe this is just kind of where they're at right now.
And to be fair, like the front of the grid is so competitive that it would be actually tough for them to break through. Like if you look at the times, Yuki was less than a second behind Charles, and that's all the way down in P8, right? So It seems like even the car's competitive, their pace is competitive, but the top of the grid is so stacked, honestly, with some pretty good talent, some pretty fast cars, that for them to break through, they would really have to make some significant changes to like break into that top group. And I'm curious how much this kind of stuff factors in, but where teams don't have the funds available to be bringing updates to their car every single weekend and saying like, oh, we need these for this track and this for that track, where they're having to be a little more strategic with their upgrades. It's interesting to see them kind of make a pretty good, like significant jump up in pace this weekend. I'm curious when then do we see new developments in like 2, 3 races time? Is it a little further down? So I'm curious what the trajectory from this point here is. I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I mean it's exciting though to see them make this improvement and all, but at the
I
very
agree.
same time, all the other teams have the potential to introduce similar upgrades or different
Right.
setup changes that could put them in a good spot. But I do think that AlphaTauri showed that with their the Red Bull powertrain and their kind of figuring out the car and all, that they have been able to kind of get closer or close that
Hmm.
gap to the top a little bit quicker than other teams have. Where I feel like the a lot of the other midfield teams have made improvements and brought improvements, and it has kind of kept them the same distance back as the top of the pack as they've made their upgrades. Like they're a second and a half behind, and then Ferrari and Red Bull bring upgrades and setup changes and whatever to improve the car, and they make their changes and everything, and they're still a second and a half behind, but they're just quicker overall.
Hmm.
But AlphaTauri to kind of jump up and jump a couple other teams in that progress, I think is why that's pretty exciting, because the other teams we have seen bring these different upgrades already, and so maybe this is just AlphaTauri honing in a bit more on how well they can set up or how to best set up the car with the power unit and everything, just like any of the other constructors who are engine buyers are kind of trying to figure that out.
Hmm. Yeah, and it fits with their qualifying pace, like especially with this track. As we know, the Red Bull pretty quick in a straight line. Baku having the long 2km straight. They're going to be a little quicker in that scenario. They are like because, like you said, they do have the Red Bull powertrain. So yeah, just great stuff from them in qualifying. I think they're the two guys that surprised me the most on the same team. And then obviously, Seb was pretty fast. Who interested you in the qualifying?
Yeah, well, in the qualifying, I think one of the big things was seeing Lewis up there, just so close to George. We've
Hmm.
seen Lewis struggle a lot in the qualifying sessions, and just in the races in general, and he was able to really put the car in a good spot. I mean, we've seen him in that 7 through 10 kind of range previously, but
Yeah.
he did end up in a pretty good spot going into the race, and I think that that's kind of where the Mercedes needs to consistently be. We can't. I don't think it's. We don't like seeing them have a big gap between George putting in these good laps, even though they're running different setups. They're using Lewis's car to test things and figure things out and all, which I totally get. But I like seeing him up pretty tight with George, and only being 2/10 off the pace. That's not a significant gap really. So
Hmm.
definitely good to see that. But otherwise, I mean, I think that everything was pretty generally standard, other than Valtteri not making it out of Q3 or Q1. I mean, so I think that was or no, he barely made it out of Q1. That was the same mistake they made on the broadcast, that they
Hmm.
thought thought he didn't make it out. But Valtteri, I expected to end up a bit higher than starting P15. He's looked really good throughout the season, so that was definitely a surprise, and also being beat by his teammate Zhou Guanyu. I think that's just not quite what we expect out of Valtteri, especially someone who has a lot of experience on this circuit, and a bit more on like street circuits in general. So those were kind of the things that stood out the most to me from qualifying.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point on the Alfa Romeos. And no signs in qualifying of the heartbreak to come for the Ferrari powertrain.
No, not at all. Which is pretty wild, and just kind of to get into the race.
Yeah, for sure.
We ended up with a pretty ridiculous amount of DNFs. We had four Ferrari powertrain cars. The Haas of Kevin Magnussen, Zhou Guanyu's Alfa Romeo, Charles Leclerc, and Carlos Sainz all ending up out of the race, not finishing. Very surprising. Lance Stroll also out of the race as well, after making it pretty decently far into everything as well. About about 5 laps to the end. So definitely a tough day for the Ferrari power units across the board.
Yeah, and in a tight constructors, a tight drivers championship, having a double DNF weekend is really not where they want to be. Obviously, that's like kind of stating the obvious. However, this is the same kind of reliability that we were questioning Red Bull in the beginning of the season, where they were having these oddball issues, and now we're seeing Ferrari get into the same kind of trouble, and it's at a point where now the teams have accrued some points. Now the differences are showing a little bit, and it is not good to have your two drivers that are in contention for the top of the table to just be out on reliability issues, not even like mistakes that they made.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty nerve-wracking in general, because like we said, not just the two Ferrari cars were out, but two other Ferrari powered vehicles were also ending up having some different power unit issues and everything. And so Leclerc, his engine is completely shot. It's beyond repair. He's going to be on his third power unit. You are only allotted 4 per season, and we'll have to take engine penalties after that. So they're already in a spot where, I mean, we're only a third of the way through the season, and they're 3/4 of the way through their allotted power units. That's definitely a concern. Kind of continuing forward, I just can't imagine what the cost of that would be. I really don't have any idea. But you're not only taking engine penalties after that, but you're also just digging deeper and deeper into your budget cap for the cars and everything. And speaking of that, I just wanted to briefly make a correction, but driver salaries are not included in the budget cap. So when I had talked about McLaren losing budget cap space if they decided not to keep Ricardo as their driver for next year, I misspoke last week, so I wanted to clarify.
Okay, nice, good correction.
Yeah, saw that throughout the week, and so that would not be dead budget cap space. It would just be a hit financially to the team in general. So,
right. Okay.
But I think the bright side for Ferrari was that Carlos Sainz's issue was a hydraulic issue. Primarily, so his actually was not power unit related, really. So hopefully his whole issue with the hydraulics didn't cause any other issues, but he didn't fortunately have to stop because of that. So that is at least one power unit that still will be functional and good going forward for a little bit further in the season.
Yeah, and you have to worry about the competitiveness of a team if they are losing that many engines kind of this early on. I'm pretty sure Baku was around 8. So we still have a lot of time to go. And if they're going to be taking engine penalties, like what if, every other race or every third race or whatever, they're having issues, crash out, bust a gearbox, things like this. obviously the gearbox isn't the engine, but just mistakes happen and crashes happen and this and that. Like that's gonna start to definitely impede their chances of getting deeper into the championship, and we may just start to see Red Bull just start to walk away with it. So just big unfortunate weekend for Ferrari overall because because you were saying the main team and then also other cars that were using it, Joe and Magnussen, correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the other kind of I guess midfield areas that I want to talk about before we get to the top of the table and how the race finished. I did want to just mention that we saw some really solid driving from both McLaren drivers, and so that was something that I really had to mention as standout. They were, again, very competitive with each other, which is good to see. I think that Ricciardo's kind of had a slump. We've talked about it. Everyone's kind of wondering what he's got, and he was able to put in a really solid race. But McLaren doing a similar thing as the Red Bulls, kind of telling their drivers not to fight each other, like just do the best for the team with what we got, and kind of putting themselves in a position to get the double points finish was a nice way for that weekend to go for McLaren. And then, of course, Fernando Alonso finishing in a solid P7 and also surpassing Michael Schumacher as the driver who has raced the longest since their F1 debut. So that with like Michael Schumacher, it's not like most years or seasons raced. It's more of a most like longest career length since Michael had left F1 and then come back and raced more for Mercedes and all that fun jazz. So pretty cool, and also great to see him just racing really well. He had a solid drive out there, was looking pretty competitive and all. And so a really nice finish. And then, of course, as we mentioned last week, as you mentioned before, Seb Vettel. How about his race? I was very, very impressed.
Yeah, and his qualifying result got him, most of the way there for that result. Drove a great race, finished very strong. Pretty sure he qualified. Qualified P7, P8. Went up 2 places, so that's really strong. It's good to see Seb Vettel continuing to be a threat towards the front of the grid and able to make moves because he's a very exciting driver to watch.
Oh, absolutely, and he had really, really great pace. He, I think, could have challenged Pierre a little bit more if he didn't end up having his little take to the escape road and doing the little quick flick U-turn, which was pretty dope to see. But that's just so impressive because you see this such a tight space and he's just like, and I'm turned around now, and you're like, whoa.
Yeah, it's almost as if there was a 180 button that he just press and the car just spins around like that. That's how automatic it looked.
Batmobile-esque, just spin him around, get him going the other way.
Hit the U-turn, yeah.
But he had a really, really nice race, and like I said, without that, I think his pace was good enough to start competing with Pierre up in P5. But of course, awesome finish for Pierre. It was a really, like we said, good weekend for the AlphaTauris. Yuki had a little bit of a struggle during the race, but showed good pace as well. Just ended up out of the points a little bit after kind of a rough race day. So,
yeah, I heard an interesting point from Sam Collins of the F1 team. He said that there was some data that showed the break of Yuki's DRS could have been linked to the bottoming that was happening significantly on the straights for a lot of the cars. So the G-forces of the bouncing up and down cause the structural integrity of the DRS to become compromised, and then it broke off.
friggin' duct tape fixes everything. I was shocked that they let the car back out. The broadcast made it sound like this was like the worst idea ever to allow the car back out on the grid, but that duct tape held tight.
Yeah, it definitely held tight, and I'm curious how much of the like quick pace was so that nobody from the FIA could run over and like stop the car.
Probably part of it.
But yeah, I thought that was quick thinking, got him back out on track, and at least he finished the race P13. So I thought that was pretty strong.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting though that that's something that you can do during the race. Like I know you can change like the nose of the car and the front wing and everything, but that's not a part of the car that I typically see fixed. And obviously they have like there are duct tapes that are for like aircraft and things like that are like insanely adhesive, much stronger than your normal everyday duct tape. So I'm assuming they have something like that they slapped on there, but it's just such a kind of ridiculous moment that you don't ever expect to happen, that they're like, oh shit, the DRS is broken, slap some duct tape on it.
Well, if the gaffer tape that they mention in the on the broadcast is like similar to the like aero tape that they would use on planes and stuff, it seemed pretty strong because he didn't have any issues afterwards. But yeah, it's probably not the preferred fix method that the FIA would enjoy.
Definitely not. But yeah, so a tough spot for Yuki to be in because he was really driving well up until that point where his DRS broke. So kind of not being able to push and use the DRS in the DRS zones the rest of the race kind of had him just stuck and a little stagnant. But getting, I guess, towards the top of the grid a bit more, I wanted to, of course, mention the Mercedes boys coming in, taking advantage of the opportunity with both Ferrari cars ending up out of the race. George Russell finding his way into another podium this season, along with still having finished in the top 5 of every race this season. Pretty insane from him. But I did definitely want to talk about Lewis a bit as well, and kind of the concerns with this porpoising and all. Like he had a great race, but for one, the man's not getting any younger. Like he's not old or anything, but like the body of a 36, 37-year-old is very different from the body of a 23 or 24-year-old, however old George is. And I saw a lot of people who are like, oh, it can't be that bad with the porpoising. George hopped out of his car, no problem, and Lewis is blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, George is 13, 14 years younger than him or so. He also podiumed, so he's got some adrenaline and excitement. Lewis was complaining about his back during the race. Like, of course he's going to be... Like, he was complaining about his back, like, halfway through the race.
Yeah. So, and it sounded bad, saying, like, the seat's gone cold. Like, that's brutal, man.
Yeah, like, if you're so... just like thrown off and uncomfortable and everything that your legs and like things are going numb. One, I can't imagine that that's great for your quality of driving or general like safety of driving. Sure. But also like, and they've talked about it so many times on the broadcast, the porpoising, like I cannot understand in my brain how they figure out where the braking zones are and how they figure out where to start braking leading into turns when on a long straight they're just fucking up and down jiggling like a goddamn bobblehead that you gave to a 4-year-old. Like they drive down these straights and get going at these speeds, and then they still are so spot on with like where they're I don't know how they track it with their eyes. Like it's insane.
Yeah, the amount that they're bouncing around in the cockpit seems definitely unraceable. So it's pretty pretty impressive that he's able to, to get it done, and even like racing very competitively as well, which is very impressive. But there is, the concern of youth. Like you're not getting any younger, and it starts to be, it starts to just be more of a factor. So yeah, you don't want to see that. The teams, some are for a standard ride height, some are against it. So obviously, we'll see if anything changes in that regard. But yeah, it's tough to watch him get out of the car so slowly and be so uncomfortable.
Yeah, and so I just looked at so George Russell is 24 and Lewis is 37. So
Sure.
there's a 13-year age gap. Like it's his body is not going to take it as easily, but it's also like looking at it that way, it's also really bad for these young drivers to be dealing with those kinds of issues at an early stage of their career, because that can impact their ability to have the longevity that some of the other drivers have had, like
Right.
Alonso and Lewis and Seb. And so I think my opinion on the whole porpoising issue and everything by the and kind of decisions from the side of the FIA, I don't think that implementing a standard ride height is the way to go about it. I think that is unfair. Well, I won't say unfair because it's that's as a Red Bull fan. That's my bias coming out a little bit, but I guess it would be similar to what the FIA did in terms of not allowing Mercedes to continue using the what was the wheel system that they could push forward and pull back and adjust the ride height and all.
DOS.
Yeah, they're the DOS system. Yeah, dual access steering. So I guess it would be similar to how the FIA banned the DOS system and everything, so as to not allow like one team this extra advantage or whatnot. And I guess on the Red Bull side, them having figured out kind of the porpoising issues and not having the same issues as the other teams, which it seems across the board is pretty consistently an issue. Maybe setting a ride height limit is the way to go. My initial thought was setting a limit to the amount of G-forces that can be created, like vertical G-forces for the drivers. And so if you like break a certain limit, because they have computer like systems and things like that, they can easily track that. But limiting the amount of vertical G-forces so that teams who have figured out how to not have the porpoising issue can still continue to use their setup and do things the way they are and don't have to worry about a ride height issue. But hey, if a team is struggling with porpoising, they've tried different setups, they've tried different components and parts and pieces and whatever else to figure out how to resolve the issue, and they can't, make them raise the ride height so that they are not having the same kind of forces and are changing the aero enough to allow for less of a porpoising issue. I think that would be the most fair way to not penalize teams that have figured it out, but to ensure some general driver safety and all. But I don't know what the best. That's just my thoughts on it. I don't know if that's the best way to kind of handle it. I guess we'll see.
It's at least an idea, and I'm curious how much, because we've been at Monaco, Baku. What's the other street circuit? Miami was a street circuit.
Yeah.
So I'm curious how much of the bottoming has to do with that as well, where you're on streets that are used with, tractor trailers and SUVs and cars normally throughout the day. So I'm curious like what those actual track surfaces look like, that's very hard to tell from just like the spectator perspective.
Yeah, and we'll
So
be
as we get
moving
away,
to those
right.
other circuits.
So we may actually end up seeing it less. This may be the worst of it, just based on the long straight, heavy braking zone. So yeah, really unfortunate, but hopefully it's just like a specific characteristic about this track, and they can use it to inform races down the line. But yeah, overall it's really tough to see, and it feels like a weird thing to be the concern, because it's almost as though the commentary around the bottoming is like, well, we wanted new cars and we wanted teams to face new challenges, but this isn't the challenge we want them to be facing.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, yeah, I agree, but I think it's going to take us just a little bit before we see it really come into its own, and before it can be something that is just ignored by the teams. Oh, it's just ground effect cars. We got it. Yeah, I think it's just going to take a little bit to come into their own, and it's just the flavor of the year.
Yeah, and
It just sucks that it hurts Lewis so much.
Yeah, and I mean, it sucks in general. Like I really am concerned about the younger drivers too that are experiencing that. Like, if you mess up the discs in your back and everything, and like end up having that, like that can easily cause you to retire from any number of occupations, let alone something as physical as driving. And so
I wouldn't wish that on anybody, bro. That sounds just like a
brutal.
nightmare.
Yeah, it sounds terrible. And so, like, I don't want these younger drivers to get to the point. I mean, we saw the Ferraris dealing with it a ton as well. I know Carlos Sainz has spoken out about like thinking the FIA should make some changes and adjustments, and like you do have to take everything with a grain of salt, and also know that drivers are competitive, and so like they also are not going to necessarily be advocating for something that they don't see as in their interest. And so
That's a great point to make.
So you do have to think of it that way a little bit as well, like, because we see of the 20 drivers, Fernando Alonso, one of the oldest drivers on the grid, was the only driver who was I guess against different imposing regulations regarding the porpoising, because he's like, our car's fast and it doesn't have that issue, like I'm fine.
Right.
So like, they have to figure it out. If that makes them slower, that makes me faster, or like that gets me up the grid further. So so seeing that especially, I think, made me kind of just think a little bit more in depth about it and be like, all right, these, like, the drivers for, I mean, even though the Red Bulls did also agree that the porpoising was an issue, it doesn't seem like they're experiencing it as much. So it's less of a kind of detriment to them than it's already been for the other teams. So
yeah, and there was data from the weekend that showed like the amount of vertical G forces on the vehicle, and the Mercedes was far and above like the worst, with all the teams being at about a median level. So yeah, there is something to be said there. But yeah, moving forward, hopefully it becomes just a thing of the early season of 2022.
Yeah, and I guess just as a final note on it, I guess one, we will quickly see if it was due to the street circuits and everything.
Yeah,
because we're going to have one of two things kind of happen. One, we're gonna go to Canada and the porpoising on their extremely long back straight as well, and everything is going to be still terrible, and they're gonna have to look at it and say, okay, like, this is not just an issue due to the paving on the road or whatever. Or the other side of it, hey, if you're going to host a circuit moving forward, then we're going to expect you to do some repaving and ensuring that the track surface and everything is smooth and in good shape for before you are going to host a race. I think that that's a reasonable thing to say too. If we see Canada and there's very little issues and Lewis jumps out and he's like, I feel like Benjamin Button, I feel better than I did like when I was 20, then yeah, I think that that's an also fair thing to say. Like, hey, I mean, Miami's track was around their stadium. It had parts that looked like they went over like the entryway to overpasses and things like that, and little like bumps in the or like just different bumps and issues with the road. Drivers were complaining about the track quality there in terms of all the dust and slipping around.
Right.
Hey, maybe that's the thing. Like, okay, Monaco, you pay the least to be part of the schedule and everything, but you're gonna have to repave those roads that the track's on and make sure that they're to a certain quality before we'll drive there. Or same with Baku. Like, I think that's a reasonable expectation to have of the tracks to have them prepare if they're going to host a race and bring all this this money in from F1 and from the event and everything. Like, hey, this is a stipulation. You got to make sure that it's good enough quality. Maybe for some places that's like you don't have to repave it every single year right before the race, but maybe you do it once so that it'll last for couple years down the road.
Yeah, no, I think you're definitely on to something. Maybe there is a little bit of updating of the circuits that have to happen. I know that's not the first time we've brought that up. Obviously, it's easy to say for us. We're not the ones paying for it. But yeah, it is just a bit of a safety concern. You're right. Just like CTE in football, it may begin to become a sticking point of a conversation where, instead of these young drivers being looked at as something to like aspire to be, it's like, oh man, they've got to deal with those back issues. Then it starts to not shed so nicely on the sport, right?
Yeah, well, and we'll either shed negative light or it'll create positive change. It's
Sure.
gonna do one thing or the other if that does become a consistent issue. Obviously, we hope that teams can figure it out just mechanically and all, and figure out the arrow so that it becomes a non-issue and everything. This is the first year of the new regulations and all, so
Yeah.
I don't want to be
Growing
too
pains.
hasty, but yeah, I think some growing pains and figuring out new things. But just in general, rough to see Lewis like feeling like that. I think he said it was the most difficult race he's ever driven,
Damn.
and everything in his post race interview. He just looked just absolutely wrecked, like wiped out from it and all. So to the point that Mercedes and Toto said that he was questionable for the Canadian Grand Prix. They've since said that he's doing okay and he'll be good to race, but to right out of the gate be like, oh, we don't even know if he'll be good for next week. Like, you might get the Stoffel Van Dorn show. Like, that's not what you expect.
Sure. Yeah, no, not at all.
So,
And he doesn't seem like the kind of racer to sub himself out. So yeah.
no. So, but getting up to, I want to talk a little bit about the Ferraris and then the Red Bulls, of course.
Yeah, for sure.
But like you had said at the kind of start of the F1 talk, really, really terrible day for Ferrari. I texted you while I was watching the race, and as soon as it happened, with signs going out, I was like, oh man, this is big for the constructors and just the drivers championship fight. Like, Sainz had slowly been kind of falling out of that drivers championship contention and all, and that was just a big hit. But then seeing Leclerc go down as well, I think that was Ferrari's first two-car DNF in about 11 or 12 years or something like that. Like that
Wow.
is just super uncommon and just a pretty brutal way for the team to end their weekend.
Yeah, and especially when there are so many issues flying around, whether it's the overheating, the bottoming, the powertrain issues. Um it's it's wild to get like a hydraulic issue from one car, an engine issue from the other car. It really does feel like these teams are just in murky waters for what to do with these car setups and how to proceed with the weekend. Or maybe there's an element of, are they turning these cars up in a way that is, maybe cooking them a little hotter. It's really hard to tell because obviously the teams give off like little to no information
Right.
about like what goes on behind the scenes. It's just like they basically just say the part or the system that experienced a failure, and then they're just like, well, we're gonna look into a solution, and then it just into the ether. You guys forget about this, please. So yeah, it's really tough to draw any conclusions, but definitely not coming at the right time. The Ferraris dropped way back in both of the championships. They bled points.
Yeah, and so just really really rough, and like you don't want to see that. Like I said, it's like just an awful weekend for them, and it that's I mean it showed with how much it was affected the team and all. Like their pit wall and garage were empty with like 10 laps to go. Like they just packed it in. So definitely a tough look, but looking towards the top two and Red Bull. First off, I have to give huge props to Checo. Again, his qualifying performance to put him up in P2 was insane. He had some really great pace, and getting the taking P1 from Charles before the first turn was really an impressive start from him, and I was excited to see Checo just continue to kind of go on a tear with how his driving's been. He's been looking really solid.
Yeah, really quick off the line, got it done, kept the pace throughout most of the race. There was a little bit of a strategy difference there towards the end where, Max was let through, but yeah, overall I think he is just an impressive driver in the way that is like, when you compare him to the other second drivers that have been next to Max, none of them seem to be up to snuff. There's no comparison. He's just faster. Sergio is not only like up there and competing with Max, we're even seeing a Red Bull number two driver like maybe even be able to sniff at a championship himself. So that is really fun. Obviously, as that boils over, the team orders are going to be even more and more frustrating for fans, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I think right now in the early season, I've said it before, I can appreciate the measured approach in that scenario where Red Bull lost a lot of ground last year to just like really sloppy racing, like wheel to wheel type racing. So it's easy to understand, and not necessarily between their two drivers, but just in general, like, Max getting put in the wall and everything. It's
Yeah.
easy to understand them not wanting to risk that kind of stuff and just take the free points when they have them.
Yeah, well, especially like seeing both Ferraris DNF, like
Yeah, like
you have to
why would you race?
maximize it, and like and not just with like Max last year racing wheel to wheel, because Checo ended up getting penalized twice in the same race for trying to pass Leclerc on the outside or
Yep.
push him out, and bumped him into the gravel.
That's a great example.
So there were instances of the sloppy driving on both sides, and or both drivers for Red
Yeah,
Bull,
yeah, yeah.
and so I think it's good to see them just like ensuring like the team wants the best finish. Like McLaren wanted their drivers to have a double points finish as well, and didn't want to end up with an issue that took one of their drivers out. They're trying to maximize points, and for Red Bull, of course, it was much more substantial in their fight, just with the Ferraris being out. But the other thing, which actually is surprised me with Checo this weekend, was he really didn't seem to quite have the care for his tires that he typically does, and like so that is kind of the precursor to the different strategies and everything that just ended up with Max being able to outpace him towards the end. It seemed like that first lap, although it was really, really solid from Checo, ended up causing him maybe to damage the tires a bit more early on, especially being at the front of the grid. A lot of the drivers this week I noticed were very slow to get to their starting positions. So some cold tires, and then beating Leclerc out the gate and taking that turn one pretty hard. Maybe that did some damage that decreased the longevity of his tire's life. But I think when you get to the point with the team orders and the no fighting over the radio, like it was another instance of Max being at a much faster pace. He pitted later than Checo did for his hard tires. I forget. I can look here, but I believe he pitted about 4 laps later. We saw so 2 laps later. So he had his tires last 2 laps longer. Max did than Checo, and at that point he was just moving much more quickly than Checo was when they said no fighting. Like if they had said, have at it, boys, gloves are off, like Max had the better pace at that point and would have gotten past anyway, especially on the straight with DRS. Like he was going to at some point, sure, because he had better pace, and it seemed mostly due to the life of the tires. So it's like, why, when especially you're looking at the lap times and seeing Max just cutting into Checo's lead and everything, why are you going to be like, yeah, duke it out, both bin it into the wall?
Yeah, especially after the Ferraris have already, like, they're done and gone, like, by a long shot. So that just would be an even more reckless decision, knowing that, like, you have the race locked up and you're like, oh yeah, go for it. That would be, I think, pretty unacceptable from a team. So it's weird that the narrative from fans tends to want to be selecting for the super really fucking exciting one shot of a day, but they don't care about, like, oh, well, this just means they get to win later. Isn't that what you also care about as a fan? So it's weird that teams or fans want to compromise like their team's winning chances by seeing the most exciting thing that could possibly happen today. It's like, it's really odd.
Yeah, well, and I think it's just partially due to the fact that, like, there are also fans of a lot of the midfield teams that, like, McLaren and Alpine and, like, all these teams have their own fan bases as well. And,
right,
of course, if their drivers aren't competing for the win and they're still rooting them on, hoping they get points, put in a good performance, like want to see them do well and all, then I'm sure there are tons of people that are like, heck yeah, we want to see some craziness. Like, who knows? Maybe that'll put my guy on the podium, or, oh yeah, like, let him race. Like, I want to see excitement because my guy's not getting the TV coverage. So at least I want to see the craziness happen, so that it's like it adds that little extra excitement. Like, as a Red Bull fan, of course, I'm like, yeah, I'm like looking forward to the celebration for the drivers and constructors championship and like how exciting that could be and everything. But I can imagine the other 9 teams are just kind of like, I want to see exciting racing and I want to see my driver do well. And I guess at the cost of being willing to accept that a team is like trying to maximize their team success. Like,
right.
So,
right. And that's definitely what I'm here for. I think that, yeah, while it's not the most exciting thing, an intelligent tactical decision that can end up paying dividends later, like that to me that always just seems like the better play in my opinion. So yeah.
Yeah. So, and then of course, just since we have not mentioned it yet, but Max with another win, first or youngest driver to 25 wins. Not the least amount of races, but still, it is exciting to think of where he's at in his career and everything. So Seb Vettel, Michael Schumacher, Fernando Alonso, and Lewis Hamilton are the next 4 in terms of youngest drivers to reach 25 wins. So it's just exciting to see where he's at in his career and all as a fan. And very kind of interesting to see just progression of his career, but a really just overall solid race from him. He looked really good, really strong throughout, and so I really don't have too much to say otherwise. But congrats to Max on the win there.
Yeah, and GG's to Red Bull overall. I think you said it all, my friend. Great race by him. He got it done. Tire management, kudos, man. Like he said, was that a good race or was that a good race? You tell me.
Yep, and I would say it was a good race.
I would agree.
But
at least from the Red Bull perspective.
Oh, absolutely. And so we end up with just looking at the drivers and the constructors. Checo ends up jumping Charles, so he's up in P2, 21 points back from Max. So Max has a little bit of a lead there so far, but still definitely a tightly contested championship still. But for the constructors, now Red Bull has an 80-point lead, which is pretty huge. So looking at that, especially if they can keep some of this newfound consistency in terms of their engine and not having car trouble and everything, that is definitely a lead that will be difficult to catch up on. Definitely not out of reach as of yet, though. So we'll just have to wait and see what ends up happening. So,
well, that is all we can do. Just taking it one day at a time to see what happens, and just keep prayers in your head.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, definitely. I got really off the rails there with my brain, so I apologize. I've had some little moments today.
That's okay. That's okay. Just shut down moments where it all goes quiet for a second.
Yeah, it's happened a few times today where I just am mid-sentence and it all just kind of starts falling apart. So it's been not my best moments, but it's all good. So looking at this coming weekend's race, we've got the Canadian Grand Prix. As we mentioned, just looking forward to seeing kind of what I think the biggest thing we're looking at going into is the porpoising issue and if that's going to still be as significant at this circuit as it was in Baku. So I think that's the most kind of pressing thing to keep an eye on, but it's going to be an exciting time. We haven't been there since 2019, so it's been a couple years. Nick Latifi and Lance Stroll coming back home for a home race, so that'll definitely be nice to see as well.
Damn. So maybe that's why Nicholas Latifi doesn't ever finish that well in races because he's Canadian. He's just like, oh yeah, you can go ahead. Yep. Oh, you can go ahead. Yep. Yep. You can go ahead. He's just
Merge.
being he's just
Yeah.
being very kind on the grid.
Might be it. You never
Hmm.
know. It's just innate that he can't help it.
He's fast, and he's fast enough to be up there, but he's just too Canadian and too kind. He's just like, you deserve it. Yeah, you go, you go.
Yep. That's got to be it.
Damn, that's a tough weakness, dude.
It is. Well, and
Mm.
it, according to some reports, could cost him his seat in F1. Because there's some rumors that Oscar Piastri may come in and end up being put into Latifi's seat. I don't know if that would be next season or if it would be mid-season break. Not sure exactly where they would be looking to do that, but it has started to come up in conversation, and there's some rumors going around that there may be a contract in place for him.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm no team principal, but I would not be looking to keep him for very much longer with the amount of crashes, the amount of like just bottom place finishes from him. Yeah, you definitely got to start looking elsewhere. And it's a shame, but the life of an F1 driver is not that long. Life expectancy low. So yeah, that can be a tough one.
Yeah, so we'll see if he ends up if those rumors are true. I mean, there's always things like that flying around about any drivers, just in terms like who are struggling, and he's definitely had a rough kind of end to last season and start to this one so far. So hopefully he'll. I mean, I just hope we see some good performances from him. That's what I want to see out of all the drivers, is them driving to their maximum potential. So it would be a bummer, but at the same time, you want the most competitive drivers in F1. We want to see good competition, but looking at kind of the results from the last time we were here in at the Canadian Grand Prix, we had a Lewis, Seb, Charles podium. So that is going to be kind of another good potential spot for Seb, who's performing really well, and also Charles, so some good history for him here at the track. And hopefully with the new power unit and everything, he'll be back up to a pretty competitive level up there as well. So I think that'll be interesting to see how this shakes out coming back after a couple of years.
Yeah, it's a fun track. It's usually been a bright sunny day, so I imagine and any of some of the characteristics of the recent tracks hopefully won't be present. Hopefully it won't be too hot. Hopefully it won't be too anything. So these racers can just have a good race. But yeah, Canada, really fun track. Like you said, they have that long back straight. Some fun, quick turns, some chicanes chicanes tying into straights make for some like flat out sections, giving chances to overtake depending on mistakes being made. So yeah, overall I think it's a really fun and exciting track. Last time out, like you had mentioned, this is where Seb took the 5 second grid penalty, or not grid penalty, 5 second time penalty for going over the grass and kind of cutting Lewis off. Lewis wasn't happy. So yeah, that was unfortunate. Lando's brakes blew up. They like melted his suspension. So yeah, it was an interesting race last time. So yeah, definitely looking forward to this weekend for sure.
Yeah, and so also a 2 p.m. race. I like these ones that are in our time zones a bit more.
Yeah.
It's much easier than waking up at 7 a.m. for Baku, and then there's the easy commute for all the F1 teams, just a few thousand miles all the way over to Canada. Great for
Just
a back-to-back
short
weekend.
hop
Yeah,
across the pond.
as you mentioned, leading into the episode, from the back of a shipping container, sitting in an F1 car,
I thought that was a good one.
flying across the Atlantic Ocean. So definitely looking forward to this weekend, and hopefully some fun, nice racing.
Don't burn my brakes, baby.
So we will be right back, and then we will be talking about the LPL, some of the matchups that we had this week.
Sounds good. And we're back. Gonna talk about some LPL matches. Obviously, we had a whole lot of games, and I think it was even it might have been week 3 or no, not week 3. Week 2 is already underway as well. We're just gonna cover some games from week 1. I think we're gonna be doing a little bit differently coming into the summer season. Just going to make some changes in the sense of instead of trying to cover like full regions and whatever, we're really not going to be able to hit it all that well. We're just basically going to end up be reading Wikipedia pages saying like this game happened, this team won. We don't want to do that. We want to go a little bit more in depth into the games, maybe talk a little bit about the players a little bit more. So we're just going to try and cherry pick some of the like maybe standout matches or just teams we like or whatever. And we're going to go that route. So this week we're covering the LNG Billy Gaming series and then also the FPX and EDG series, which did happen first and was quite exciting, if I do say so myself.
Oh yeah, and it's always fun, especially at the start of the season while everyone's figuring out kind of the meta, figuring out the picks that kind of suit them best, and they have a few less strategies with changes going into kind of the full gameplay of the season. And so you see a lot more back and forth early on, which definitely was exciting in the EDG FPX series. But I think just in general from the series, Flandre was my standout performer just off the bat. And we get to see him on a number of different 3 different champions in the 3 games. But it was like pretty back and forth. The first match, EDG kind of ran away with pretty heavily. We saw Flandre on the Kale having just a huge performance, and I did want to definitely mention that the Kale pick seems very strong right now. And I am expecting to continue to see that both in the LPL and then see it in the other regions as we're getting started. But Flandre looked just so good on it. It's so hard to put pressure on that pick early right now with I don't recall exactly what changes were made to balance things, but it seems less easy to dive now. I don't know if it's tower damage was shifted around or what, but
Yeah, I'm not sure what exactly brought it back, but one of the things that does seem like a positive to the pick is you could either build it AD or AP, which is kind of interesting, especially when teams are thinking about their like damage profiles and how much AP do we have, how much AD do we have. It's interesting that not only could a pick be a flex pick, but it could be a flex build even. It feels like there are a few champions that have that kind of flexibility. So whatever did change within the, in the numbers in the Rito supercomputer, it seems like a potent change. Because Kale was pick banned in all 3 of these games. Obviously, she just showed up in game 1. Or was she banned in the other games?
So she was banned.
She was banned in game 2 and then banned in game 3 as well.
Yeah.
Teams don't want to see it, and obviously, like you said, Flandre played a great Kale. What was his scoreline? Yeah, he was 8-1-8. Just a monster. Obviously, being able to save not only your life but a carry's life if you need it as well with that. The invulnerability, the ult seems like a really good pick.
Yeah, and the other pick that we see come back twice in this series is Mako's Tom Kench. That was also huge. Just having so many different kind of safety nets for their teams. You have the Kale Ultimate, you have the Tom Kench being able to save someone from ACC or anything. You have the Lee Sin kick if you need disengage and whatnot. You have Mako playing a very strong pick in the Tom Kench, and just based on what we saw there, I kind of expect that to be consistently a pretty dominant pick, because you do see once he gets some items, get some tankiness and all, both in game 1 and in game 3, he really was kind of a force, like just throwing himself in for the knockups and everything, diving in and putting himself in the middle of the team fight and just living for just a long enough time to cause a lot of disruption and allow like the Kale from Flandre in game 3, the Ari and the Vladimir being able to get in there and put out a lot of damage while he's causing those disruptions is just a huge pick. Especially that game 3, I felt like there was some good potential for FPX to kind of turn it around, and a lot of those Tom Kench engages and whatnot were pretty significant at the end of the game.
Yeah, he has a lot of options as a defensive champion, which is super strong. I'm interested to see if the fasting Senna is a worldwide thing. I'm curious if we're going to see priority on it as much, because we have seen it in a couple of games as well. So it's a duo that has gained popularity ever since the champions have been released. It is one of the main duos. Senna works not that great with other supports, and Tom Kench works not that great with other AD carries. But when you put them together, it becomes a force to be reckoned with. The Senna Tom Kench lane, I'm curious if that feels like comfort for Viper and Mako, if it feels like flavor of the week kind of thing. But yeah, we'll see. Obviously, Mako played it really well, and just I think the word of the day is disruption with that champion.
Yeah, and I think the side of it where it gets a little interesting is more so what doesn't get banned. So in game 2, we don't see the Tom Kench banned, which gets picked by EDG in the other 2 games, but we also don't see FPX take it. The Renata gets left open, and the Renata was banned in game 1. It was banned, or it was not banned in game 3, but EDG went back to a similar kind of style for the bot lane with the Senna Tom Kench. But I think that EDG felt the need to kind of try to counter the Renata in the bot lane by going with the Nami being able to give a little more distance and range and everything, the Nami Lucian, to hopefully not end up getting hit with the Renata ult and kind of ending up in a bad spot. But with the Lucian and the Nami in that game too, they just got pressured really hard. LWX and Hong played a phenomenal bot lane, getting the lead early, and then just kind of having Clid there consistently to pressure that and just get a really big lead, which I think is where that game kind of fell apart for EDG in game 2.
Yeah, and I have to question the Orianna pick. It just doesn't seem to be doing as much as some of these other mids. It doesn't roam that well. It doesn't have as much damage. It doesn't have as much pick potential. So obviously, it's a safe pick. It's something you can always go to, but it doesn't seem to have that flashiness, that punchiness that some of these other mid laners have, like LeBlanc and Ahri right now. Obviously, a lot of these mid laners are prioritizing Ahri significantly. I thought that may have just been a little bit flavor of the month going into the MSI. Maybe it was a little bit of international style on you type flavor, but the fact that it's sticking around as high priority as it is tough. Obviously, there are a lot of bans coming at that mid lane in that game, but yeah, it didn't look the best. I don't think that contributed heavily to the loss, but you look at the scoreline 1-1-3, felt like had a very minimal impact on the game, and I think Scout is a player that needs to have an impact for EDG to get some momentum into a game.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think that's my biggest thing because, like you said, we do see a lot of mid lane bans targeted towards that. You see the Twisted Fate, Ari, LeBlanc all out in round one. Well, along with the Swain, whether you'd play that mid or top, depending. But just, I think the targeting towards that pushed Scout down to that Orianna, which was banned by FPX in game one. So we did see that get banned out. We see the Azir get banned out as well in the second round of banning phase and everything. So they pinched the mid lane pool pretty hard. But I do agree. I think that the biggest key to that is exactly what you said. Like, Scout is the player that you want on some sort of playmaking champion. There has to be something else that you can utilize, whether it's the Galio to be able to roam and make plays elsewhere, whether it's, I don't know, like they're just not going to brainstorm here on the pod, but there's got to be other options that he could have had more impact, maybe a Lissandra or something that you can go and be more aggressive, provide that self-sustain with your ultimate Zonias and everything. I think that might have been a more game-changing pick than the Orianna, which is more of that, I won't necessarily win super hard, but I won't lose super hard if things go bad. Like, it's a safety pick. So
yeah. Well, and they seem to kind of put their eggs in the, Nami Lucian basket. That was kind of like their early game aggression, try and get an advantage, take bot side pressure, get a dragon or two. That didn't really work out with the Kalista Renata. They had the pressure advantage for sure. And like you said, Clid was not a stranger to the lane. So yeah, game two goes to FPX in pretty solid fashion. Zhao Laohu on the Fiora looked really good. Split push threat. No one could really touch him. So yeah, solid.
Yeah, and the other thing, just kind of to wrap up the series, so of course EDG took that 2-1 in the series, had a really solid game three, but the consistency from FPX to go back to the Kalista in 2 games in a row, I think that I appreciated them going right back to it after game one because the Kalista is a really strong pick right now, and we'll see that going into the next series. And I feel like we'll see that going forward in the LPL and other regions, but I fully expect the Kalista to be pick ban. It was huge for LWX in game two. Having that as a really significant form of engage, along with like the Zoe bubble or Viego getting in there for a stun. Those are it's huge for your engageability and everything. And so looking forward into the LNG Billy series, I really thought Doggo played some solid games on the Kalista there.
Yeah, and he was quite the standout, obviously, over the course of the series. His play was quite, to use his support's namesake, his play was quite crisp. Obviously, I looked really good on that champion. I like how the Kalista gives the bot laner agency to start a fight. I think that's really fun. Obviously, the support chooses where he goes, but the ability for the AD to just say, hey, come on in, we're going to try and fight these guys, I think that's really exciting and gives teams just another option when sometimes starting a fight is the hardest thing to do in the game. That's a solid outlet and a tool that they can use to get that done.
Yeah, and especially in that kind of lane where Callista, if she can utilize that ultimate and that engage to get ahead, she just becomes so strong in the late game. It's just um,
Neutral buff
pretty.
security is solid from her.
Yeah, I mean, you get so many benefits from the Callista getting ahead, and so with the thing that I do have to really highlight, I think, is that with Billy Gaming compared to FPX when they used the Callista, I think they paired it with the right kind of support there. With FPX, we saw the Callista and the Set because the Nautilus was banned. You see
Hmm.
the Set come in, or the Callista and the Renata. Um, Being able to throw a Renata in who can get off her ultimate and or the handshake pull and everything like that has the ability to um, like interact, but you're so squishy. The difference between that and throwing in a Nautilus, throwing in a Thresh. I mean, we see
Hmm.
the Nautilus get banned out in game two, and Billy was like, "Oh, you're gonna take the Nautilus? Fine, we'll throw Thresh at you.
Hmm.
We'll throw this other big meatball who can hook you and lock you down and provide a ton of utility as well, as opposed to throwing in a more squishy support like FPX did." I thought that was really the way that you want to utilize the Callista, and it really showed in that game too, particularly in that matchup with the Ezreal and Karma. They got ahead early and just really just pushed through that bot lane to just dominate that game.
Yeah, and that was definitely the doggo show. It was just everybody just to support this guy, and he definitely did it. So, yeah, amazing for them to play through that and really pick and ban for the strength of the pick. Where, yeah, I think you're right. The Renata is like maybe like okay, but pairing it with something like a Nautilus or a Thresh that has an engage of their own on top of it, they're super tanky. They're just like these big meatballs that you chuck in. Yeah, I think that's definitely the S tier combination for Callista. And you're right. I think we're going to see it a whole lot more. We even saw an Alistar in game three with the banning of Callista from LNG. But you just see that they're looking at it, and the Callista Alistair is not far away.
Yeah, it's definitely not. I could easily see that becoming kind of an alternative solution if depending on the picks and bans and everything.
Hmm.
And the just the other general highlight I wanted to mention
Yeah.
from player wise and everything was Tarzan was very impressive throughout this series. And so he was kind of I'd say probably my MVP because with game one, he put out a really solid performance on the Viego into the Wukong. He was able to really push his lanes ahead. He helped out with getting Doomby ahead in the mid lane with the bot lane as well, and performed really well. And then to also be able to go into the matchup from the other side and be able to uh, go into game three and play the Wukong into the Viego and put out a really solid performance there. I was just pretty impressed by him overall and his ability to kind of just be able to utilize the champion to do his best and get his team ahead where they could. I thought he had a really solid series for LNG.
Yeah, and it shows a great knowledge of and this is the very like in the weeds type stuff that these pros get into, and like all the things that are considered for pick and bans is like there is a standard way that a Viego Wukong matchup, if all things are equal, if you just look at those two in a vacuum, there's a way that Viego has, the level 2 to 3. Oh, if you can find Wukong in the early jungle. Oh, there's a scenario where Wukong will always route for the topside crab. It's like the knowledge of these matchups inside and out is really where you see these players able to grind those differences out. Where, in Formula One, they talk about like where cars are going to be able to find time on the track. It's like the really slow corners that can really make or break a race because you're there for so much longer. You have more time to make a mistake. I think knowing the matchups and understanding both sides, being comfortable in a pick and ban to play both sides of the matchup, where you don't feel like one is a must ban, like, oh, I can only play Viego, Wukong's got to go. I think that shows strength from a jungler and maybe like one of the lesser points that you talk about, but having knowledge of a matchup, I think can make or break a game, especially from such an important role as the jungle.
Yeah, and I think that that's going to be a matchup that we see a lot because it does seem like it's not. So there are other roles that have to have primary bans. I mean, we see the Gwen being consistently banned out, the Kales being consistently banned out, the Renata, these supports, these mid laners, and so the ability for Tarzan to play both sides of the matchup, play it well. Even in game 2 that they lost, he did not really have a bad showing. They kind of just got beat across the map that game. So I don't think that is. I didn't knock him too hard for that game, I guess is the best way to say it.
No, definitely not.
With how the rest of the series went, his engages on the Wukong with the ultimate and everything to get some really good team fights for LNG. Really sealed that. We got our first kind of glimpse of Bin though on Billy Gaming and his transition and all. I know that's something we had talked about last week. I thought he looked pretty solid. It just mostly seems to me like they aren't super comfortable with playing together yet, and they aren't quite sure how to utilize him best because he does have such a good ability to create pressure around the map with the different champion picks that he has, but also just like his play style. I think as we see the summer split go on, I think we'll definitely see their cohesion and kind of their maybe picks and bans or their style that they're playing shift a little bit because he, I think, is one of those game-changing kind of players where either way, could be good, could be bad. He's playing an aggressive and kind of impactful pick. He's not sitting there in the lane and just sitting on a tank trying to get big and just be engaged for team fights. He's pressuring sides of the map, looking to get turrets, looking to dive champions and all. And so we'll get to see how they kind of bring their team together throughout the summer split.
Yeah, and like week one cohesion stuff is always present. So yeah, that's kind of easy to whatever. They'll mold, they'll mesh. I think the cohesion will get a little bit better as we as we just get deeper into the season.
Yeah, and the only other thing that I thought was funny, and it's just because I couldn't get it out of my head when I was watching the games and everything, was Noel and Cody from the Tiny Meat Gang podcast would have a field day with Iwandi as a support name because there's just way too much opportunity for joke there.
Oh yeah, he'd be trying to get Cody with the with the name jokes.
Yeah,
those are really funny. It's tough to tell when they're set up or when they're not. But yeah, Iwandi is a great one.
Yeah, so I just in my head was being immature and just making up any sort of joke I could use his name as a pun or as a part of. So
I want these nuts in my mouth, son.
Yeah, that's about what I got to. I think that's just the crispest referencing the other sport kind of way too. To turn that into a joke. So
there you go.
But LNG, Billy Gaming, FPX, and EDG EDG's come out and LNG both at the top of the standings, going 2-0 so far with their first matchups, both with a 4-1 overall record, 2-0 each in their series. So lots of LPL coming up, and then we also have a number of the other regions starting here very shortly. LCS is going to be starting up this weekend. We have the summer season starting off on, I believe, Friday. Friday we have 5 games, and LEC should be starting up pretty soon, along with the LCK as well. So.
Yeah, we had, I'm pretty sure we had 2 matches from the LCK already. We had Nongshim versus DRX, and then Hanwha and somebody else. So yeah, LCK underway as well. But yeah, we're just going to have matches on matches, so stay tuned for coverage from all the top 4 regions as we, move through the summer and look forward to 2022 Worlds.
Yeah, and as we mentioned, we're going to try and focus more on specific matches, so we will, of course, keep you guys up to date with standings, things like that. But in general, we just want to make sure that we're providing a bit better of more than just like the highlight,
just the headers,
headlines and everything, giving a little more in-depth analysis of the different teams that are exciting to us for any different reasons. So, but Justin, I guess, do we have any other League of Legends notes to mention before we move right along?
Not really. I think the only other comment that I would like to make from the LNG Billy Billy Gaming series was the Game 3 Swain Vladimir combination in the top and the mid lane. I think it's been a while since we've seen the double AP team comps look as strong as that showing. I know when the team comps can grab Gwen, it looks really strong. But other than that, there aren't that many other like top tier APs. Obviously, you have Ken and Rumble shows up sometimes, but the double AP hasn't looked as good as the amount of sustain that Vladimir and Swain had in the fights. It felt like they were just like perpetually at half health the whole time. I thought that little combo was interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to make because we see the Swain getting banned out a bit, and we see the Vladimir coming out multiple times in those series that we mentioned. And so I think that the survivability that you get from those champions is that it can be very huge, especially if you have a lot of other good DPS coming in. If you have some, I'm not that Swain and Vladimir don't do any damage or anything, but their ability to go into the middle and really just survive while putting out a really good amount of DPS before they get killed just allows for so much outside hitting to come from the AD carry role, from the jungler, and really to kind of swing those fights. So I wouldn't expect to consistently see them together because that definitely seems like a pretty significantly strong combination.
Yeah, and it actually makes me think of what you were talking about with Tom Kench when we for the other series where like they are just disruptive elements. They're just going to try and get into the middle of your team, hit as many people as possible, like chase out your mid laner. Like they are like pretty tough to deal with. The fact that they just get to stand next to you, and by virtue of standing next to you, they're doing a lot of damage. So yeah, it's an interesting way to go about it. Obviously, they took the dub with the strategy, but yeah, just really looking forward to the rest of the summer season.
Yeah, absolutely. So that wraps us up with the League of Legends coverage for this week. So we'll be back to you guys with some of the upcoming starts to LCS, LEC in next week's episode and the following. But I guess that does bring us to the flavor of the week for this week. Do you want to lead it off?
I would love to, and my music is actually a question for you, sir.
All right.
So I found myself on YouTube. I was watching some music videos. Post Malone just dropped his recent album. He has a couple of music videos up. I thought the music video for "Insane" was pretty cool. Just some low key dancing in front of the pool. And so my question to you is, how much are you seeing new music videos? Do you enjoy them? Do you check for them? What's your level?
I like them when I see them, but I don't seek them out typically.
Hmm.
I think I should because I do actually really enjoy them when I find a good one and everything, especially for artists that I enjoy and that
Hmm.
sorry for music that I like. So I'm sure that for Post Malone and his new album, I'm sure I would enjoy seeing that a bit. I saw that no, but like it's a lot of times when I don't seek it out. It's when it comes across. I saw Noel put out a music video for I can't remember what song it was that he put out recently. Um, but I watched a bit of that. It has a pretty cool sound to it. A little different from what he's done previously. A little more old school kind of.
Hmm.
So I enjoyed that. But yeah, that's kind of where I am. I'm like I like them when I see them, but I don't typically actively look them out. I've
Sure.
Yeah, I've had a couple of nights with Colleen where we are just like pull YouTube up on the projector or on the TV, and we're just like watching, just like taking turns picking something out to watch. But
Hmm.
otherwise, I don't typically seek it out too much.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I think that tends to be my like engagement with it. Sometimes a song in a video gets stuck in my head where like I'll go to it a bunch and like just like watch and listen to that one song. But yeah, overall, unless it comes across, yeah, the one that was recently recommended to me is the "All Eyes on Me" from the Bo Burnham special,
Hmm.
where he like grabs the camera and dude, I love that. It's so good. Love the song. Anyway, my food for the week: Sarah made up a banging chicken tortilla soup, homemade, pretty much everything. She's a wizard when it comes to her soups, and that is another great one. And then, sir, my movie is another question for you. You saw the third Fantastic Beast, correct?
Yes, we just watched it the other week, so
Okay. Now, have you seen Stranger Things season 4, part 1, addendum A?
I have not.
Okay, cool. Then we'll talk about Fantastic Beasts. What did you think? What were your thoughts? Did you enjoy it?
Um, I thought it was fine. I
Mm.
thought that the second and third one were both like fine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not too critical typically of movies if I'm entertained. So like and just for any future conversations that we have on the podcast, my general take about movies is I like to watch things for entertainment value. I
Mm.
don't typically like to get super deep into plot holes and things that I think are wrong with the movie. I like to watch things and just kind of enjoy them for what they are. And so whether it's like whatever kind of entertainment that is, like the main movie that I would elect to watch is some sort of action movie. It could be an action
Sure.
adventure movie. It could be like Lord of the Rings or Star Wars. But it could also be like Saving Private Ryan or like I'm not explosions and flashy lights and cool like CGI and graphics and stuff like that. Like I'm entertained. Like
Sure.
it's visually fun to look at typically and all. And so um, I don't actively look to pick out points of the newest Star Wars movie of well that doesn't match up
Right.
with this or that or like that doesn't make sense in the context of that like so with Fantastic Beasts, I thought one it was a bit of a the dynamic shift in terms of the villain with Johnny Depp not being in it as Grindelwald. made it just very like, especially because Colleen and I watched the first, second, and third pretty much back to back to back. It was like very bizarre.
Yeah, especially in that like opening scene, you're like, wait, who the fuck's that guy?
Yeah, I'm like, did I put on a James Bond movie because he is a Bond villain like that?
That's so funny. I
And
was like, that's the chief.
yeah, I'm like, this is it. I'm like, what
so
happened? And then I like realized that Johnny Depp had different whatever going on, and so they cut him out. But I was like, it wasn't just like they could have substituted someone else in and given him the same like makeup and like it went from looking like freaking Jack Frost from a Santa Claus 3 or whatever to a Bond villain, and it was just very bizarre transition, and he didn't have the same personality almost as a villain. And I'm like,
yeah, it was like a totally different writing of the character.
So like I still did enjoy the movie. I think my biggest criticism, because I don't really criticize, like I was talking with some friends about it, it's a Fantastic Beasts movie, and the first one is the only one that really you get to see all these different like creatures and everything. After that, it's just the freaking platypus that likes to steal shit and the like stick bug that picks locks, and it's like, that's not really like, yes, those are two Fantastic Beasts, but like I'm looking for a little more. I'm looking for like a reverse giraffe, or like, I don't know, something weird that's like it has more impact on the movie than just these two isolated kind of characters.
Well, what about the crabs, dude? What about the sidewalking crabs?
I did get and see with that, like, a lot of people would probably be like, this is so fucking stupid, I don't like this.
It's at least comedy relief.
I thought it was funny. Yeah. I laughed. I was cracking up. So fun. I enjoyed it. But I guarantee there are people out there that are not able to watch movies the same way as I do and have a much more critical eye. I'm pure entertainment value, and I get why people would have some criticism, but at the same time, I'm not looking for it. So,
it's not gonna make the difference between the day, but so
not planning to rewatch them. Like,
never in my life am I gonna waste time. Never.
I'm good, but I had a fine time, but I'm good.
yes, that was me and Sarah's kind of takeaway of that. So yeah, that is my flavor of the week. Aaron, tell me what you've been working with.
Yeah, so my food for this week, it's actually pretty simple. So yesterday when Colleen found out she was sick, I was getting ready to drive home, and we had not planned we were planning to be with her family to celebrate her mom's birthday. Shout out to Peggy, happy birthday.
Shout out Peggy.
And so because our plans got rearranged and all, and we had to stay home, I ended up just picking up pizza and wings from our local spot that we really like. They have like some really solid buffalo wings. The pizza's always good. So just pretty basic, but it's one of our go-to kind of quick, easy, close spots. And it's nice because it's a place that I really liked when I lived at my last apartment, and it's like now even closer to where we live now. So it's walkable if we want to. It's like super fast for picking it up on the way home from work or whatever. But yeah, pizza and wings for this week. For my music, on the ride home I went up to New York over the weekend for engagement party for my friend Steve and his fiance Holly. And so on the way back, I was carpooling with a couple of my friends, and we were just listening. So I was like, I drove up and I drove back. It was about 7.5 hours of driving all in one day. It was a lot. So on the drive home, they decided the best way to keep me entertained was to play a very eclectic music. So we listened to a bunch of initially Disney soundtracks that they were singing along to, Hercules, Moana, whatnot. I mean, hey, it was late at night, made sure I didn't fall asleep. They moved on to musicals. We did a whole section of strong female vocalists, which I really enjoyed because there were a number of artists that I hadn't listened to as much of their catalog that as I did on that ride. So we were listening to some old Avril Lavigne and Paramore. We listened to Amy Winehouse. We were listening to Ariana Grande. We had just few other artists I'm sure I forgot to mention, but it was kind of fun. Like, I had never really listened to much of Amy Winehouse, but I recognized some of the songs from like Passing or whatever, and it was very kind of cool to get a insight onto music that I don't usually listen to. Like, it's not my typical like style or whatever. I only know kind of the hits from some of those artists because they're very popular.
Sure.
But I really enjoyed kind of diving into that side. I was thinking about it while I was driving, and and I didn't say it out loud because I didn't want them to like change up their playlists or whatever for me. But I was like, I'm really enjoying this, but this is also not music that I would ever have just like, I'm never going to be driving home from work and just be like, oh, I'm going to throw on Amy Winehouse or I'm going to throw on Ariana Grande unless it's a song with Mac Miller. Like, that's not my like style of music that I elect to listen to, but I enjoyed very much it being kind of brought to me as a let's listen to this, and I was like, okay, sure, let's go for it, and I enjoyed it a lot. So it was kind of a refreshing little change of pace. So
Yeah, for sure. That's very cool.
And so that brings me to my visual medium for this week. So it is a show that I got sucked into a little bit while Colleen was watching it yesterday. It's called Pray and Obey. It's on Netflix. It's a documentary about Warren Jeffs and his basically like polygamist cult that was in Arizona,
Very
Utah,
cool.
and everything. And so it's very just bizarre. Colleen is very intrigued by like those kinds of like really like out there kind of niche religious kind of groups or whatnot, and I just plopped down and she was in the middle of it, and I was like hooked. I'm like, yo, I was like sitting there analyzing it because there's a lot to like with this in particular. There's a lot to look into because there are people who were like born in the cult or brought into it at a very young age who are like, the question in those kinds of like situations is always like, why don't people just leave? It's just so easy to leave. And they like really highlighted like the different aspects that make it so difficult for someone to leave, whether it's like they have like for those younger people have lived there basically their entire lives and they like wouldn't know how to really survive in the outside world, or
Right. You have no net.
yeah, or whatever else it was.
You have no skills, actually.
Yeah, like and whatever skills you have are extremely related to whatever your task or job is in that small community. And so it's just a very interesting and like kind of intriguing thing to watch. Pretty sad, kind of all the stuff that happens to less than willing people, but it was definitely an interesting watch. So Pray and Obey, it's a documentary about Warren Jeffs and his polygamous cult. So that is my flavor of the week, wrapping it up on a strong note there.
Yeah, that is the most positive and uplifting thing that I've ever heard.
I mean, that's basically just what we're here for.
Yep.
So with that, that does bring us to the end of this week's episode. We, of course, are on Spotify, Google Podcasts. Check us out on YouTube. Hit us up on Twitter. Tell us what your flavor of the week is. Maybe it's more depressing than mine. We'll wait and see. But thank you all again just for listening to us. We really appreciate it week after week, and enjoy putting this out for everyone. So.
Yeah, just want to follow up on what Aaron said and just say thank you so much to the listeners. We very much appreciate it. Tell a friend, let them know how much you enjoy the show, and get them part of the gang. But yeah, new episodes every Thursday. Find us on everywhere that you can find a podcast. We thank you so much. This has been another Tall and Short of a podcast. Peace out.
Later.